The rain came down in great sloshing sheets, making the whole world look grey and miserable. Anne, Mary and Jane trudged onwards, their boots squelching in the thick mud of the path. They were hiking in the South Downs, a place they usually loved, but today it felt like a chore. The wind howled around their ears, pulling at their waterproof hoods and making them shiver. Jane, the youngest, let out a little sigh. "Oh, I do wish we had stayed at home," she grumbled, wiping a stray wet strand of hair from her face. "My feet are soaked right through, and I can't feel my toes anymore. It's not much fun, is it?" Mary, always the most practical of the three, pulled her jacket tighter around herself. She tried to sound cheerful, but even her voice was a little bit flat. "Don't you worry, Jane," she said, giving her sister a little nudge. "We'll soon be at the top and then we can have a rest. Just think of the lovely view we'll see. We just need to keep going a little bit longer. It's all part of the adventure, you know. Proper explorers don't mind a bit of rain, do they? It makes the hot chocolate taste even better when we get home and are all warm and dry." Anne, the eldest, was usually full of bright ideas and jolly plans, but today she felt just as gloomy as Jane. The endless grey sky seemed to press down on her, and the rolling hills looked like grumpy giants sleeping under a wet blanket. Every step felt heavy, and the path seemed to stretch on forever, winding up and up into the misty clouds. She longed for a warm fire and a good book, not this horrid, damp walk. "Mary is right," she said, though she didn't quite believe it herself. "We must be brave and keep going. We are the three sisters and we can do anything together." They walked on in silence for a while, the only sound being the patter of the rain on their coats and the squelch of their boots. The path grew steeper, and they had to stop often to catch their breath, leaning against the wet, mossy banks. Everything was the same monotonous shade of grey, the sky, the distant trees, the very air they were breathing. The fun had completely drained out of their day, replaced by a cold, damp feeling of disappointment. They had so looked forward to this hike, but it was turning out to be a dreadful, dreary affair indeed. At long last, after what felt like a whole day of climbing, the sisters reached the top of the hill. Before them stood the ancient circle of trees known as Chanctonbury Ring. The rain had eased to a light drizzle, and for a moment they could see the patchwork of fields stretching out below them. It was a fine view, even with the clouds hanging low. They stood for a while, catching their breath and admiring the scenery. "Well," said Anne, trying to summon a smile, "we made it. It's quite something, isn't it? Even in this weather it feels very old and mysterious, don't you think?" After their short rest, they decided it was time to find the path that would lead them back down the other side of the hill. But when they looked around, every direction seemed the same. The mist had rolled in again, thicker than before, and it swirled around the tall beech trees, hiding the way. They couldn't see the fields anymore, or any familiar landmarks. A cold feeling, and it wasn't just from the rain, began to creep over them. "Which way do we go?" asked Jane, her voice small and wobbly. "I can't see the path at all. Are we lost?" Mary tried to stay calm, looking for the little wooden signpost they had seen on their map. But the fog was like a thick white wall, and they couldn't see more than a few feet ahead. They walked one way, but it led only to a tangle of thorny bushes. They tried another, but it ended at a steep, slippery slope. Panic began to bubble inside them. Anne remembered an old legend her grandfather had told her about Chanctonbury Ring. He said that if you were ever lost, you had to walk around the ring of trees 7 times, and the way would be shown to you. It seemed a silly thing to do, but they were desperate. "Well, it's worth a try," Anne declared, trying to sound confident. "Come on, let's hold hands." They began to circle the ancient trees, counting each lap carefully. 1, 2, 3 times they went around, the wet leaves brushing against their faces. 4, 5, 6 times, and still nothing happened. The mist was as thick as ever, and they were beginning to feel quite dizzy. As they completed the 7th circle, feeling utterly hopeless, a kind-looking man with a big bushy beard suddenly appeared out of the fog, holding a steaming flask. The man smiled warmly at the 3 startled sisters. He had kind, crinkling eyes and a cheerful red scarf wrapped around his neck. "You look as though you could do with something to warm you up," he said in a booming, friendly voice. "I was just having a spot of soup myself. Would you care for some?" Before they could even answer, he was pouring a thick, delicious-smelling vegetable soup into 3 little mugs he produced from his bag. The sisters gratefully took the mugs, the warmth seeping into their cold fingers. The soup was the best they had ever tasted, full of carrots and potatoes and wonderful herbs. As they sipped the hot soup, a strange and wonderful thing began to happen. The thick grey mist that had surrounded them started to thin and drift away. A little patch of blue appeared in the sky, and then another. Suddenly, a brilliant ray of sunshine broke through the clouds, lighting up the entire hilltop. The raindrops clinging to the leaves of the trees sparkled like a million tiny diamonds. The world was no longer grey and dreary. It was bursting with glorious, vibrant colour. The grass became a brilliant, shining green, and the path ahead glowed with a soft, golden light. The sisters looked at each other in amazement, their faces bright with surprise and delight. Their gloominess had vanished completely, replaced by a feeling of pure joy and excitement. It was as if they had stepped out of their ordinary world and into a magical picture book. The air felt fresh and clean, and the birds began to sing their cheerful songs from the branches above. "Golly!" exclaimed Jane, her eyes wide. "It's like magic. Everything is so bright and beautiful now. It doesn't even feel like the same day anymore, does it?" They thanked the kind man for the soup, but when they turned back to him, he was gone. He had vanished as mysteriously as he had appeared, leaving only the empty mugs behind. The path that had been hidden was now clear as day, winding down the hill like a bright yellow ribbon. It was edged with flowers of every colour imaginable, bright red poppies, sunny yellow buttercups, and deep blue cornflowers, all nodding their heads in the gentle breeze. It was all so strange and lovely that the sisters couldn't help but laugh. Their miserable hike had turned into a truly wonderful adventure. Feeling refreshed and full of cheer, the 3 sisters began their walk down the sunlit path. Everything just seemed to sparkle with a magical light, and honestly, they felt as if they were walking through a dream. Just as they were admiring a particularly large and cheerful-looking daisy, a little red squirrel with a very bushy tail scampered down a tree trunk and stopped right in front of them. It didn't seem afraid at all. It sat up on its hind legs, twitched its nose, and looked directly at them with its bright black eyes, chattering excitedly in a series of squeaks and chirps. Anne and Jane simply smiled at the cute creature, thinking it was just a friendly woodland animal. "Oh, look," said Jane. "What a dear little squirrel! He must want a nut." But Mary was staring at the squirrel with a look of intense concentration on her face. To her sister's utter astonishment, Mary knelt down and replied to the squirrel with a few soft clicks and whistles of her own. The squirrel chattered back urgently, waving its little paws towards a clump of old hazel trees just off the path. It was clear they were having a proper conversation. "Goodness, Mary," cried Anne, "what are you doing? You can't possibly understand what it's saying." Mary looked up, her expression serious. "But I can," she insisted. "I don't know how, but I can understand him perfectly. He's very upset. He says a little boy named Johnny has fallen down the old hidden well over there and he can't get out. The squirrel is frightfully worried. We have to go and help him, quickly." Without waiting for another word, Mary followed the squirrel as it bounded ahead, leading the way through the trees. Her sisters, though completely bewildered, did not hesitate for a moment. They trusted Mary and hurried after her, their hearts pounding with a mixture of fear and excitement. The squirrel led them to a clearing, where a circle of crumbling stones was almost hidden by overgrown ivy. Peering over the edge, they saw it was indeed an old well, deep and dark. From the bottom they could hear the faint sound of a child crying. "Help!" a small voice called up. "Please, can anyone help me? I'm stuck down here." The squirrel's message had been true. The sisters knew they had to act fast. "Don't worry, Johnny," Anne called down the well, her voice full of reassurance. "We're here. We'll get you out." There was no rope nearby, so they had to think of a clever plan. Anne, being the tallest, knelt down and gripped the edge of the well firmly. "Mary, you hold on to my ankles," she instructed. "And Jane, You hold on to Mary's ankles. We'll make a human chain." It was a brave and daring idea, but they knew they had to try. Working together, they carefully lowered Jane down into the darkness of the well. Jane stretched out her hands as far as she could. "I can reach him," she shouted up. "I've got his hand." With a mighty effort, Anne and Mary began to pull, their muscles straining. Slowly, carefully, they lifted Jane and a very muddy, tear-streaked little boy out of the well and onto the safe, soft grass. Just as Johnny was safely out, a crowd of people who must have been searching for him appeared through the trees. They gasped when they saw what had happened, and then a huge cheer went up. Johnny's mother ran forward, hugging him tightly and thanking the sisters over and over again. Johnny, safe and sound, rushed home with his family, and the crowd soon dispersed, leaving the sisters standing with the little red squirrel. The clever creature stood up on its hind legs, gave them a very smart and serious-looking salute with its tiny paw, and then scampered back up the nearest tree and disappeared. The sisters looked at each other, their faces flushed with success. They had saved a boy's life. They felt like true heroines. The adventure had been tiring, but they had worked as a team and done something truly good and brave. As they continued their walk down the now gentle slope, Jane sighed happily. "Gosh, I am tired," she said, "and hungry. After all that excitement, I do wish we could have a nice cup of tea and a very large slice of chocolate cake." No sooner had the words left her mouth than a plump pigeon with shiny iridescent feathers landed on a signpost just ahead of them. It cooed softly and then took off, flying a short distance before landing again, looking back at them as if to say, "Follow me." Intrigued, the sisters followed the bird, which led them right to the edge of a village and in front of a shiny, clean cake shop with a window full of the most delicious-looking treats. Their magical day was not over yet.